What's up, it's Tom. Thanks for clicking on this video. I want to talk about a handful of Twins topics with you today, starting with Derek Shelton, new Twins manager. I haven't had much to say about this because I feel like I kind of got it all out in the lead up to the hiring. But in kind of reflecting, one of these comments from Mark that I replied to is sort of my takeaway that I have to add. And, I think a big thing, too, is a lot of what I would have to say, a lot of other people have already said. But kind of going back to this, one of the things I was saying is, this hiring is going to potentially tip the Twins' hands into what we have to expect upcoming. And I didn't have a very rosy analysis on what Shelton's hiring mean. I think this means, things could get ugly. More sell trades for their payroll / competitive window pushback multiple years. And if that's the route the Twins were going to go, you could see them prioritizing wanting a steady, proven professional managing the clubhouse to ensure that things really don't go south and get ugly. And that's kind of how I feel what the logic behind Derek Shelton's hiring probably signals. Now, that I want to be clear, that's completely speculative on my end, but it's difficult not to feel that way. So on a more positive note, LaTroy Hawkins is the bullpen coach, and I'm extremely excited about that. I think it's good to put guys on Shelton's staff who have big league careers and, impressive big league careers at that with LaTroy Hawkins. Shelton not having that on his resume is a bit of a ding. I think that matters to players. So getting LaTroy in here, and I think LaTroy just deserves it. He's a guy who's been, much like his playing career. He's just continued to stay in the game, and evolve and get better and learn. And he's done that in his life outside of baseball as well as a lifelong learner and a guy who's contributed to the amateur levels of Team USA baseball for a few years now. So I'm really excited about LaTroy getting that opportunity, and I think that's a big positive. He has his work cut out for him, so we're going to talk about the bullpen in a minute. But first off, Jose Miranda was outrighted. That's a big, I did see that potentially coming in the video earlier this offseason when I discussed the 40-man roster and potential Rule 5 ads. I did kind of call out that, Jose's days could be numbered. Change at this point, if you want to mix it up, if you want to get a different vibe, you gotta change some things that aren't working. And Jose Miranda was not working. It's tough to take too much from his MLB numbers from this year because it was only 12 games. But in AAA, he had a 569 OPS in 90 games. That is not a small sample. That is unbelievably horrible for a guy who's shown flashes of being an above average MLB hitter in 2022 and 2024. You see his career OPS plus is 101. So he's about league average in MLB. So for him to go down to AAA and to look that bad is really shocking. And, I don't blame the Twins for moving on here. I could see him coming back and playing really well for another org. But I don't think I would look back at this as a mistake if that happened. I would just say, hey, it wasn't going to happen here. Sometimes that's the thing. And, now that we're closing the page on Jose Miranda's Twins career, it makes me think back of how tight him and Carlos Correa were and how that seemed like such a special thing and how it felt like Miranda might be developing into like a cornerstone type player potentially on the Twins with Correa. Called Correa his big brother, and Correa called him his son in 2022. And I feel like just from that season on, we really didn't hear a whole lot about. Now, that doesn't mean their relationship soured or anything, but we certainly didn't hear, about Correa and Miranda staying close. And I don't know if maybe that potentially had something to do with his downturn. I don't want to speculate on that, but, it's just very disappointing how Jose Miranda's career has ended. I probably would have outrighted Outman before Miranda, but I get why the Twins did this. Cody Laweryson is a harder one to figure because he was claimed off waivers by the Angels, and I bet you if we could get a truth serum into the front office, they would admit that they expected him to clear waivers. Because why would they just let this guy go for nothing? He did look good in 7 2/3 innings in September, but it's hard to take that into too much account because he speaking of guys who didn't look great in AAA, he didn't look great in AAA. 4.14 ERA, 1.43 WHIP, and 4 walks per 9 in 76 innings in AAA. So it's not like this guy was some kind of a diamond. Movement profile is good, especially his fastball moves a lot more than major league average, but he's throwing below the speed limit. 93.2 averaging is on his four-seam, with a 95 being the average. And as you see there, he's only got a four-seamer, a changeup, and a cutter as a reliever. So he doesn't even have like a traditional breaking ball as a reliever. So, I think if we look at this from the Twins lens, it's really confusing to know why would they give up on a guy, even if his ceiling is limited. He had three options, so he could have at least been like on the taxi squad, going back and forth from Minneapolis to St. Paul, guy with options to help out your bullpen with some length on certain days. There's utility in that. But if we flip the script and imagine the Twins claiming a guy like Laweryson off waivers, I don't think we would be excited at all, to be honest. So be like, oh, whatever, another arm in the mix. So I think it's a curious decision. I don't think it's some kind of big blunder, but I do think it was a misstep. And I think they expected him to clear waivers and stay in the org is what I would guess. But I don't think it's worthy of really, digging into that deeply or reacting that strongly. Wishing him the best. I've really enjoyed watching Cody Laweryson in the minors because, he is such a fastball heavy guy and he just attacks guys. Just goes right after guys, pitches with a lot of guts. It's fun to watch a guy like that pitch. So I will miss seeing him, but not a huge loss. So the bullpen's already evolving, though. LaTroy's group here, we've Lawyerson's departure. They also outrighted Michael Tonkin, Yanis Cabrera, Anthony Masevich, and Thomas Hatch. Justin Topa's option was declined, but he still might stick around because he is still under team control via arbitration. So not sure. They may try to approach him with another deal with like an option year in 2027 or something like that. Or they might just get rid of him. They might not offer him. They might non-tender him. So that's kind of a situation still developing. I would have not declined the option and would non-tender Topa, to be honest. I just don't think he's a solution, but this bullpen needs a lot of help. This is kind of how I would expect things to go. And I'm putting some free agents here. I understand the Twins aren't going to spend money, but you can get, Danny Coulomb is a great example. You can get a usable major league free agent reliever for not that much. And that's not even to say, you can find some minor league free agents and let them compete for roles in the bullpen in spring training and potentially fill some roles with those. So you don't need to devote a bunch of money to fix a bullpen. Now, the ceiling of this bullpen is extremely limited. We're just talking about trying to get this unit from where it looks currently, which it currently looks like probably one of the worst couple bullpens in baseball. But it's not that big of a jump to get it into respectability. You're not going to get this thing up to, potentially one of the better units in baseball again without, making some investments, which they're not going to do. But you can get a cheap free agent closer. Let that guy rack up saves. Saves are expensive for arbitration eligible players, so I don't like the idea of anybody who's arbitration eligible getting saves. Get a free agent in here, potentially get that guy's stock up, and then trade him at midseason. That could be another way you kind of improve your future. Same thing with them in the middle. I'm talking about cheap vets like Coulomb. Going back a couple of years, Tyler Clippard and Sergio Romo weren't guys that made a ton of money. You can target those guys in free agency on like 1-year deals. Very limited. We have to keep our expectations in check, of course, with spending, but I think you can do a lot with a little in the bullpen. But Sands and Funderburk are the current top guys of their righty lefty. That's a tough situation to be looking at right now. Low leverage, I put Adams and Ole in there, and I know those guys, you could kind of scoff at those guys, but they're in a similar spot as Cole Sands was not that long ago. Not that Sands is, this all-star reliever or anything, but I could see both those guys developing into sturdy major leaguers. And then you have a lot of options in guys you could convert who are starting in the minors, guys like Mark Araya, Connor Prelip I put in there, Andrew Morris I put in there. Those last two guys are not currently on the 40-man, but they will be. They will get put on this offseason. So there's a bunch of other things you could do, if Pablo and Joe Ryan stick around. I think that's a big if. But if they do, you probably can convert even some of the guys who've been starting in the major leagues into bullpen guys. Maybe a David Festa, maybe a Zebby Matthews, maybe Mick Abel, maybe Taj Bradley, some of the guys you picked up at the deadline. You have a lot of options there. So, it's an interesting unit. Obviously they have a lot of work to do, but it's kind of a bullpens that if you have a lot of work to do in one unit, you want it to be in the bullpen is basically how I would put it. So it's going to be fun to see how that unit evolves. And hopefully again, they can at least get it to respectability this off season is my hope. So thanks for checking this one out. I appreciate you. We'll talk again soon.